right, what's going on, football fans? Welcome back to another episode of Bad Takes in Football. I am your host, Bad Takes. Excited to get into the Week 9 slate of games. Got some exciting games coming up this week, so we're going to dive into those very shortly. Let's wait for a little bit more people to come in. While I'm doing that, make sure you subscribe to this channel. You can see I have a goal here. I'm trying to get to my first 100 subscribers, so it really helps me out if you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to like this stream. I want this to be a fun place where we can banter back and forth about football. Again, I'm happy to talk any topic around NFL football. Let's just have a good time in here. Also, make sure to comment on this channel. Make sure also to chat. Let's have a good time in here. It makes it a lot more fun when people are engaged and talking about their teams, their takes as well. So again, make sure you're chiming in on that. But yeah, we'll give people a couple more minutes to pile in here, and we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, we will be getting started shortly. Again, make sure when you get in here, make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe. It really helps me out. Not sure why. 1 second, guys. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, we'll actually start out with the Thursday night game. We're talking about the Baltimore Ravens are traveling to Miami to play the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is an interesting matchup for a couple different reasons. First one being the fact that both of these teams prior to last week really looked like they were struggling. Like both teams were looking like they were on their way to potentially having new coaches at the end of this year. I still think that's going to be the case for Miami after this year. I think the Ravens will potentially give John Harbaugh more of a chance. They did sign him to a contract extension at the end of last year, or actually it was in the middle of last year. But again, this game is really interesting because both these teams were struggling, and then Tua really hit some lightning last week. Tua, last week in his outing, he had 4 touchdowns. This was coming off of a season where he's had 10 interceptions on the year. He didn't throw a single interception last week. And so there was actually really good signs for this Dolphins team. Devon Achane, he's a very dynamic running back. I love how he plays. I think he's one of those guys that can go get a couple yards, but he's really best known, and I think he's most fun to watch for his home run hitting plays. And he's very capable in both the run and the pass game. He's a very versatile weapon for the Miami Dolphins, and I think he's going to be someone that could potentially give this Ravens team some nightmares, especially when it comes to him in the pass game. What I've seen from the Ravens in the past when it comes to defending running backs, generally they are using a linebacker to cover them. And what I've seen out of the Baltimore Ravens, and especially out of, I would say Roquan Smith, is the fact that they're just slower. And Devon Achane, he's a burner. And so you're going to have to put someone like a Malachi Starks or a Kyle Hamilton on Devon Achane in these passing plays in order to keep them at bay. Now, on the Ravens side, I think the best news and probably the most important news about this game is the fact that they are expecting Lamar Jackson to play. Lamar Jackson did practice last week. I believe it was Friday, and there were some complications about whether he was a full participant and whether or not he was going to be able to play in last week's game against the Bears. Turns out he was not able to. The NFL is actually investigating the Ravens and how they handled Lamar Jackson's practice disposition, whether he was listed as a full participant or limited. So we'll see what happens with that. If anything, I think it'll probably be something like a fine. But again, I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Just wanted to bring it up because, again, they are expecting Lamar Jackson to play this week. It was actually interesting. He was interviewed. He was at the podium for the press conference. And one of the questions they asked was about the fact that the Ravens took their ping pong table, they took their they had cornhole sets, they had gaming consoles in there, and also their TVs were shut off. They're still there, but they were shut off. And one of the media members went up and was like, "Hey, was it you that asked to do this?" And he was like, "Yeah, I asked the equipment manager to take all this stuff out. I even asked him to take the TVs out, but apparently we couldn't." And he said he's like, it's not going to be available for the rest of the year. He did say, I don't think that they're distracted, but we need to focus on the main thing, and we just need to win. We just need to win, and we need to keep winning. And maybe we'll get it back for OTAs next year. So that's how serious Lamar Jackson is about this season, and I think he's rightfully pissed off right now because this team has extremely underperformed. There wasn't a lot of losses that the Ravens team had going into this season. It wasn't like they missed certain, like they lost certain players that are now you're seeing that impact. It's essentially the same roster, and if anything, people thought the additions that they made were going to make this team even better, and that definitely has not been the case throughout this season. Now, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Dolphins play against Lamar. I wonder if they're going to actually allow him to try to run it. I think given the fact that he had a hamstring injury and he's coming off of 3 games of missing out, you kind of wonder, like, hey, are they going to actually try to force them to run the ball and say, hey, you know what, Lamar, go ahead and beat us with your legs. Let's see how that hamstring's doing. Because generally this Miami team, they've forced him to throw the ball. And I don't think that's the way you really defend Lamar Jackson anymore. I think he's proven himself as an elite passer in the NFL, and I don't even have an issue saying that currently. So I think it'll be really curious to see how the Miami Dolphins try to defend Lamar Jackson. Because this game is Miami, I think there's some confidence that has been built up in the Dolphins after last week's game, especially in Tua. I think, the Ravens, they had a big win against the Bears as well. They really needed that win. They would have gone 5 games in a row, 5 losses in a row, which would have been unheard of for this Ravens team. But when it comes to what I actually expect, I think the Ravens do win this game. I think it'll be a close game. But with Lamar Jackson back, I do expect this Ravens team to really rally around Lamar. Everyone has said in this Ravens locker room that, we go where Lamar goes. Like, they know he is their leader. They know he basically is their team. Like, the Ravens are a completely different team without Lamar. So that's why I think the Ravens will be, they'll have a fire underneath them, being excited to have Lamar back. I think the Ravens will win this game 24-21 because I still expect the Dolphins to actually play somewhat decently in this game. I don't think the Ravens have necessarily figured out their defense quite yet. I think they've made some improvements. But you still need to see some more consistency out of that defense, especially with like a Jalen Waddle. And again, I talked about Devon Achane already. So again, I think the Ravens win this game, but I do think it's a close one. I think the Ravens win 24-21. Before we get into this next game, I just want to stop again one time and say make sure you hit that subscribe button when you enter in. Also, make sure to hit the like button. It helps people find this stream so we can get some more people in here. We can banter back and forth about your team, about these games. We're going to be getting into that Bears versus Bengals game very shortly. So again, make sure you you hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit that like button. Let's get some more people in here. Let's have some fun. All right, let's talk about the Bears versus the Bengals. Now, exact opposite of the game I just talked about with the Ravens and the Dolphins. Both of these teams are coming off of losses, and they both kind of, I would say, in a sense, kind of a little bit of a shocking loss. You know, I know that's weird to say that the Bears losing to the Ravens is a shocking loss, but at the same time, they didn't have Lamar Jackson in that game. It was Tyler Huntley at quarterback. And so I do think the Bears should have won that game, in my opinion, and that's coming from a Ravens fan. Now, the Bengals, they gave the Jets their first win of the season last week. It wasn't because of their offense. Their offense is still booming, right? I think they put up 38 points in this game, and they lost 39-38, something like that. And so the Bengals, just like the Bears, are hungry. You know, both of these teams, if they want to have any remote chance of contending for the playoffs, they're all in pretty much like you need to win games right now situations. You know, again, the Bengals, they have a losing record right now. You know, if you look at the standings for the AFC North, they are in second place, but they're 3-5. You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are 4-3. There will only be one team from the AFC North that goes to the playoffs this year. This is going to be the first time in a while that happens. And so the Bengals, they need to start getting some victories under their belt, because the Ravens could potentially get hot, and maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers turn it around. I don't think the Steelers will turn it around this week. They're playing against the Colts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, at this point in the season, you know, you need to start racking up these wins, and you need to win against teams like the Bears. Now, again, the Bengals offense, they are in a rhythm. Joe Flacco, it has to be easy. I'm not saying that he's like, it's amazing that he's done this, but I will say that, you know, Joe Flacco connecting with Jamar Chase, connecting with T. Higgins, it's seamless, right? And again, totally understand that those are very easy targets to really go after. But you know, they are hot right now. And so again, I think it's going to be coming down to, what does this Bengals defense actually do? Because I do expect Caleb Williams to actually have one of the better games of his season in this game, just purely because the Bengals defense is that bad. I know I talk about this week in, week out, but they have this amazing offense, and then their defense is almost like a JV football team. And so when thinking about this game, what I expect, I think it's, first off, it'll be high scoring. Again, I expect Caleb Williams to connect with Rome Odunze on a pretty regular basis. I also expect the Bears to be able to run the ball. And at the same time, I expect the Bengals to be able to do the same thing. I think they're going to run the ball somewhat pretty well, but I think they're just going to pass all over this Bears team, if I'm being completely honest. At home, I'm going to have to take the Bengals. I do have to take the Bengals in this game. I think the Bengals win this game 28-27 at home. So just like losing a 1-point game last week, I think they'll actually win in a 1-point game this week. So we'll see what happens from that perspective, but you know, that's my prediction for the Bengals versus Bears game. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings and the Lions. Now, the Vikings, they are supposed to be getting J.J. McCarthy back, and at this point, I will say this, I was a little bit higher on him at the beginning of the season. I know he's been injured for most of this season. He was also out all of last season. So at a certain point, I'm just sitting here saying, like, if you're J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings, you have to give him reps. He has to get more experience, because, again, he's essentially played like a game and a half, 2 games as a Viking in his year and a half as a Viking right now. Like, that's really bad. That is actually alarming, in my opinion. I don't think people are necessarily focusing on that as much. I haven't heard a lot of the media talking about that necessarily. But again, I just think that that's like a huge issue for this Vikings team and for J.J. McCarthy's development. So again, he needs to just get his reps. I don't think this is a game where he's going to be able to compete with the Lions offense. Let's be honest. The Lions offense, they are a well-oiled machine. You know, if you look at the stats from like what they're actually able to accomplish from an offensive perspective, I would say they're probably right there in the top 10, right? They're ninth in the league in total offense. And when you actually look at the points per game, they're actually third, which is the most important part, right? You can get yards and that's great, but they're third in the league with points with 30.7 a game. I know that the Vikings have weapons, right? Justin Jefferson, I would say he's not anywhere close to the numbers that they actually were probably expecting out of him. Like if you look at what Justin Jefferson has done so far this year, it's nowhere close to where he was last year. He's at 602 yards. He's fifth in the league. So, halfway through he's trending towards 1200, but I mean, Justin Jefferson's a guy that, could potentially be getting closer to 2000 yards per game. Like he's a 1600 yard sort of wide receiver a year, in my opinion. Should be sort of his average. And I know that's crazy to say, but that's how good Justin Jefferson is. This team has also gotten Aaron Jones back. Aaron Jones was injured for a couple games. And so not only are they getting J.J. McCarthy back, but they're also getting Aaron Jones. And so, again, this is a game where you just need to get reps. You need to get back into a rhythm, build some consistency on that offense. And then from a Lions perspective, what I will say is, Aiden Hutchinson, you just got a huge deal, $45 million per year, $180 million total, $141 million of that fully guaranteed. Like, hey, time to earn that contract. I know you've had a great year already. I actually posted a video about your contract in this year already. You have 6 sacks. I think it's something like 4 forced fumbles. And this is coming off of a year where you had a major, leg injury, right? You broke his leg. So congrats to him. I do expect that the Lions win this game. I think they win this game pretty handily. I think the Lions will win 28-17. That's really how I see that game going. And again, I think for the Vikings, as ridiculous it is to sound, like I really just think they need to get J.J. McCarthy out there and get him some reps and get him in a rhythm and get some consistency, because at this point, I don't really see much hope for them fighting for a playoff spot, especially with how the Packers are playing, with how the Lions are playing. And I mean, even the Bears are looking pretty decent this year. Before losing to the Ravens last year, they were on a 4-game win streak. So I think this is a year where, you kind of lower your expectations for the Vikings for the rest of the year. But again, you just want to see what you have in J.J. McCarthy and make sure that, going into next year, he has a good footing on this offense and understands how to work with his weapons. Because I do think this is a better team than what their record shows. I think injuries are a big reason why they do have the record they have. So I think the Packers win this game. I think they win this game pretty easily, 27-13. Sorry, I said Packers. The Lions. I think the Lions win this game 28-17 is actually my prediction. Sorry about that. I was looking at a different game. Next, we're going to talk about the Panthers and the Packers. That's what I was looking at. So, the Packers are looking good in the air. They're looking good on the ground, especially on the offensive perspective. I have yet to hear if Bryce Young is playing. Let's see if they've made an update since I last was taking a look at this. I, for some reason, just don't think Bryce Young will play this week. I bite my tongue. So Bryce Young appears, he will be playing in this game. He was a full participant in practice today. So that's actually a really good sign for this Panthers team. Unfortunately, again, he is facing against this Packers defense. So, Micah Parsons, I have a feeling he's going to have a field day against this Panthers offensive line. I truly do. I think this is another game where the Panthers, I thought they were going to do this against the Bills. You had to focus on the run against the Bills, who were essentially last in rushing defense. It turned out that the Panthers actually got ran all over last week. And so they really need to turn things around on that defensive side. But also, I really do think they need to double down on their run game, especially against the Packers. They gave up Kenny Clark. Their defense is stout regardless. But I think if there is a weakness in the Packers defense, it is in that rushing defense. Now, Jordan Love looks like he's really in a rhythm right now. He looks like he is confident. He looks like he has a good pulse on his receivers. He got Christian Watson pretty recently, who looked really good out there in his first game back from an ACL injury. Romeo Doubs is just very consistent. Matthew Golden didn't necessarily have like a big game last week. I still expect him to be consistent and have a bigger game in this game. And then also Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft might have taken the cake for tight end, National Tight End Day. He had an amazing game last week. And so, this is another defense where I think they have a really good chance of continuing that pace. Now, again, I already kind of alluded to the score of this game. I am curious to see how the Packers game plan against Rico Dowdle and how the Panthers decide to use him. I would also love to see, Bryce Young like making plays himself. I talked about this hoping he was going to play last week. He didn't. But like I need to see Bryce Young show me something out there. I truly do. I think he's a game manager at this point. I haven't seen the Panthers win a game this year, especially because of Bryce Young. I will say, in fairness to all the Panthers fans out there, I don't think they would have lost as badly as they did against the Bills if Bryce Young was in there. I will say that. I think that is a fact. I think if Bryce Young was playing in that game, it would have been a completely different outcome. I don't think that the Panthers would have won necessarily, right? I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is it wouldn't have been a blowout the way it was. So I think the Packers win this game 27-13. Again, just really tough matchup for this Panthers team who are just not ready to beat, those top contenders like the Packers, who are just a very balanced team. Get into a huge matchup next. No, I'm just kidding. It's honestly not. But again, make sure you make sure you comment on this. Tell me what games you're most excited about. We're obviously there's one very obvious one for me that I'll be getting into shortly. It's the 425 game. So I will be talking about that in a second. Just know that. But did I? Oh, that's what I did. I know what happened. I realize I'm on the wrong live stream.